I hope you're having a fantastic day so far. Today is April the 8th, and already right now in Jerusalem, they have started Passover. So I wanted to give you something, and maybe it'll be a blessing to you. It helped me and encouraged me. So one thing you've got to understand about Passover is what it is. Passover is the day when Israel celebrates how that God delivered them out of Egypt. You remember Pharaoh had bucked Moses and Aaron and ultimately their God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac and Jacob. And so what happened was he goes to them one last time and he says, I'm not letting your people go. God tells Moses, he said, I'm going to slay the firstborn of Egypt and every person in Egypt's land. So I'm going to prove to Pharaoh once and for all who the God of gods is. And Moses and Aaron are terrified because their sons and children and the children of Israel are going to die, all the firstborn. But God said, I'm going to make a way of salvation. He tells them if they'll take the blood of the lamb, they put it on the doorposts and the lintel, that God or the death angel will allow that death angel to pass over. So he does that night. The death angel passes over. Israel is brought out of Egypt in one night, and they commemorate that. God tells the children of Israel in Exodus 13:8, He says, I want you to commemorate, teach your sons, teach your children what has happened in order to get them out of Egypt. Now, tonight in every Jewish home around the world, those that celebrate the Passover, they will have what they call a Passover meal or a Seder meal or a Seder meal, however they pronounce it in that part of the world. Now I'm going to put a picture of that up on your screen. This is what the plate of a Seder meal looks like. It's got 6 elements on it that you see right there. Now, I'm not going to go into all that. We would be here all night. There's 3 elements though to the Seder meal. There's the plate, there's the cup, and that cup is incredibly important. That cup is the cup that Jesus was drinking from when He told the disciples, take, this is my blood of the New Testament, which is given for you. That was one of the 4 cups. They would take 4 sips of a cup. Different story, different video. There was a 3rd element, and that's what I want to show you right here. There was the bread, all right? They were to take unleavened bread and partake of that. That's what Jesus took and broke. Remember, He said, this is my body, which is broken for you. Now I'm going to show you this right here, because every element of Jewish ritual from the Old Testament, God gave it for one reason, and that was to prove and show them the life, ministry, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Everything in the Old Testament points to the coming of Christ in the New Testament. None more vividly than the Passover and everything around it. I want to show you something right quick, okay? What they would have celebrated Passover with was unleavened bread called matzah bread. This is a company here in America that makes this. This is unleavened bread, but there's a ceremony that I want to show you that proves to the Jewish people that Jesus Christ was their coming Messiah when He died in Jerusalem, and ultimately that He would resurrect from the dead. It's an interesting way that they make matzah bread. There's 2 elements to making matzah bread. Everything about this points to Jesus. How do we know that? Remember what Jesus said. He said, I am the bread of life. Now, how do you make matzah or unleavened bread? It's got 2 elements. They point to Jesus. 2 things. Number 1, flour and water. Those are the 2 elements that use nothing else, flour and water. Those 2 things are a picture of the birth, the incarnation of Jesus Christ. The flour is a picture of His humanity. That's that which comes from this earth. The water is a picture of the Spirit of God. That is that river of living water. And when those 2 things met together, they met together in the person of Jesus Christ. That's the incarnation. They would take flour and water and they would knead it together. They would put it together, okay? They would bring it out, and as they would knead it, they would then take that dough and they would roll it. They didn't call it rolling, The Jewish people don't call it a rolling pin, they call it a pressing pin. And what's so interesting about that, that's a picture of the agony Jesus went through in the Garden of Gethsemane. You remember what Gethsemane means? It means the place of pressing. And Jesus was pressed as that bread was pressed out in the garden, okay? Then they would do something. The next step of making matzah is they would take that pressed out dough, and they would take a fork, and they would literally, and you can see the holes in this matzah, okay? You can see the holes. They literally pierce the matzah. They stripe the matzah bread. Remember what Isaiah 53 said? By His stripes we're healed. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was pierced. That's what that means. And they would pierce that bread. Then they would take that pierced loaf and they would put it in the oven. That's a picture of the burial. The piercing's a picture of the crucifixion. They put it in the oven. Now here's what's so amazing. They would leave in the oven for 3 minutes. That's a picture of the burial, because what would happen when they brought it out of the oven? It would be hardened and it would be useful. That's a picture of the resurrection. Now, during every Seder meal, this is where I want to take you. During every Seder meal, there's a ceremony that the head of the house would take up. It's called the afikomen ceremony. Afikomen ceremony. Now, here's what they would do. They would take a piece of the matzah and they would take a linen cloth. Now, I'm going to take a piece of paper towel, okay? But they take a linen cloth and they take the bread and they wrap the bread up in that linen cloth, okay? They wrap it up, and the head of that house will take this wrapped up piece of bread and they'll hide it somewhere. And they hide it so the children can find it. This is the afikomen ceremony. This is the picture of the burial of Jesus Christ. Now here's what they would do. They would hide that somewhere. The children would scour through the house and find it. When the children would find it, they would bring it back to the Father. They would be so excited because now that which was gone had been found again. And watch what they would do. They would unwrap it, okay? They would unwrap the bread. They would take the bread out. And here's what they would do. They would have a ceremony where they would fold the napkin back. They would fold the napkin back, and here's why they would fold the napkin. They would fold the napkin and they would say, we're going to save this because we're going to need to use it again. The same thing we did with this bread, that which was lost is now found, we're going to use it again. So that ceremony shows Jesus, but why did Jesus? Remember, He comes out of the grave, the disciples come back to the tomb. What did they find in the tomb? The folded up linen clothes. What is that a picture of? Here's what the picture of that is. Jesus was showing us the same way He was wrapped in linen garments, you and I are going to die. But we that are in Christ, though we are placed in the grave, just as He was resurrected, according to 1 Corinthians 15, so shall we be unwrapped on that great resurrection day. The Bible is loaded with that stuff. The more I study the Bible, the more I realize that God is the only one that could have written it. I hope you have a fantastic day. Remember, Jesus is alive.